Today we're talking about a topic that affects millions of people around the world, and that is ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. You know, we often hear people say things like just focus or try harder to pay attention, but for those of us with ADHD, it's not that simple. And it's like trying to navigate through a maze with no map while everyone else follows a straight path to the exit, or like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces keep just changing shape and color every time you look away. Meanwhile, everyone else is putting in that picture perfect image without any hiccups. And that's honestly just the beginning of understanding what it's like to live with ADHD. Imagine you're in a crowded room and everyone is talking all at once. It's overwhelming, right? Now imagine that's what's going on in your mind all the time. Picture trying to complete a task while your brain is constantly bombarding you with thoughts about everything else you need to be doing or doing sometime in the future. It's kind of playing whack-a-mole with your own thoughts. And let's not forget the constant struggle to remember things, appointments, deadlines, and where you left your keys. I really wonder how many minutes or more like hours in my life I've spent searching for my keys. It's honestly very embarrassing. If you think you have ADHD or you have already been diagnosed with ADHD, it can definitely be overwhelming. But don't worry, because in this video you will learn all about ADHD, what it is, how it affects people, and as they say, knowledge is power. So whether you have ADHD yourself or you're just curious to learn more, stick around because we definitely have a lot to cover. All right, so let's get started. ADHD, or the long version, attention deficit hyperactivity. It's definitely a long word, I know. That's why most people just stick to the abbreviation ADHD. That's super simple. And ADHD is a genuine neurodevelopmental disorder that significantly impacts cognitive function and behavior. And contrary to common misconceptions, ADHD isn't something that individuals with the condition just imagine or exaggerate. It's a real clinical recognized disorder that persists beyond childhood, so it can also affect individuals well into their adolescence and also as adults. So for example, me, I'm an adult and I have ADHD. And now if we look a bit more at the numbers, research indicates that ADHD is a really prevalent condition with approximately 5% of children and about 2.5% of adults worldwide diagnosed with the disorder. And these statistics and numbers just really highlight how widespread ADHD is and how prevalent it is and how important it is for ADHDers to get the support that they really need. And it also shows that individuals all across different age groups, geographic regions have ADHD, and it also makes it the most prevalent neurodevelopmental disorder globally. So now if you think that you might have ADHD or that someone who you know might have it, what could that look like? Unfortunately, but that's also why it's referred to as a disorder, living with ADHD can present numerous challenges. And these can range from, for example, difficulties in maintaining focus and attention while you're doing your homework or while you're trying to sit down at work and get your tasks done. But it could also look like impulsivity and hyperactivity, where you interrupt people in conversations or where you just cannot sit still for a longer period of times. So all of these different symptoms can profoundly affect various aspects of your daily life, including things like your academic performance, work productivity, relationships with family, friends, or romantic partners. And a lot of ADHDers actually have trouble forming and especially staying in friendships. So understanding that ADHD is a legitimate neurodevelopmental disorder is really important for just promoting awareness, reducing stigma, and also ensuring that individuals with ADHD get the support and resources that they really need. That's why it's also so important to understand that ADHD is just not a character flaw or not a result of laziness, but it's a complex neurological condition that requires understanding. It requires empathy and appropriate intervention to just manage it effectively. So let's look at the symptoms. Because ADHD is often perceived as primarily hyperactive disorder. I mean, it also says it in the name, attention deficit hyperactivity. disorder, but it also manifests including a much broader spectrum of symptoms and challenges. And the misconception that ADHD is solely characterized by hyperactivity overlooks all the other challenges ADHDers face on a daily basis, like, for example, regulating attention, impulse control, emotional dysregulation, time management, struggling to prioritize, struggling with working memory, and the list just goes on. In fact, there are actually 3 different subtypes of ADHD, including predominantly inattentive presentation, whereby the hyperactivity may be less prominent or even absent. If you're interested, I can also make another whole video about the 3 different subtypes of ADHD. Just let me know in the comments below. Because today I mainly want to focus on how ADHD manifests in everyday life. Because by understanding these symptoms more comprehensively, we can also better appreciate the challenges of ADHD and its impact on the individual's lives, and then support them, or if we have ADHD ourselves, get the support that we need or ask for the help. So for hyperactivity, a symptom of ADHD that significantly impacts many individuals, I think we all have that stereotypical image of a child bouncing off the walls in our mind, but hyperactivity can be kind of seen in various forms and present in various forms. So for those of us with ADHD, the hyperactivity is not always physical. It could also present in internal restlessness, where our mind just keeps spinning for hours and hours and just keeps going and going, and it just will never stop. Or we constantly feel that like we're driven by an internal motor and we just can't stop. In my personal experience, I honestly find mental hyperactivity the worst, and this is also what most of my clients tell me, because imagine having a mind that's constantly racing, making it so difficult to focus on any task that you're working on or trying to sit still for long periods, because again, you're just driven by that internal motor. And have you ever experienced a sense of restlessness during a meeting or a class? Or perhaps you found yourself constantly shifting in your chair or tapping your foot to kind of elevate that restlessness, that restless energy. Or you might have noticed that your mind just keeps wandering off, and instead of focusing on, for example, what the person is saying in front of you, you're thinking about what to get for dinner or what to make for dinner. And similarly, have you ever struggled to engage in quiet activities like reading or watching a movie without feeling the urge to constantly move around or do something else? You might also notice that you always have to be on your phone while you're watching the movie, or having to clean your apartment while you have to watch something else, because just sitting still or focusing on one thing seems so boring and not stimulating enough. And all of these are just some of the examples of how ADHD hyperactivity might manifest in everyday situations. But remember, ADHD hyperactivity is diverse and really unique to each individual, and it's not confined to specific behaviors or situations. Also, how it manifests can vary widely. Now, for the next symptoms, impulsivity. This stems from difficulty in impulse control and inhibition, and it can also lead to impulsive behaviors such as interrupting others mid-conversations. Who can relate to that? Because definitely me. How many times have I found myself in a conversation unable to hold back my thoughts or ideas, either leading me to interrupt others mid-conversation or constantly trying to think of the thought so I won't forget it. And then I usually forget or don't pay attention at all what the person is telling me. Before my own diagnosis, I honestly did not even realize that I was doing these things. And I only became aware of these patterns or symptoms, traits after my diagnosis, or I kind of started recognizing them once I just learned more about ADHD and the ADHD symptoms and traits. Also, if you want to learn about all the symptoms in depth, take your own test and figure out which symptoms come up for you, where they come up for you, prepare for a diagnosis, and outline or know how to get a diagnosis and what the steps are. I created a whole ADHD diagnosis guide that includes honestly all the information that you will need to learn more about ADHD, to get the diagnosis if you have ADHD, and also know what the steps after a diagnosis are. You can find the link down below in the description. Another symptom of ADHD is inattentiveness, and this aspect of the condition often arises from challenges in maintaining focus, in being able to pay attention and have sustained attention, or making it very difficult to stay engaged in honestly anything that you're doing. And this can also have an impact while you're driving, in school, work, conversation, and again, the list just goes on. Just consider someone with ADHD attempting to follow instructions for a project, and despite all of their best efforts, they may struggle to grasp the details because of their inattentive symptoms. They frequently miss just crucial information, and they require repeated reminders to just stay on track. And of course, this difficulty in sustained attention can pose significant challenges in academics, personal settings, but also impact your safety, because if you, for example, are not paying attention while you're driving, it can really affect your safety, but also someone else's safety. And because focus and attention to detail are often essential for so many parts of our lives, it can often be, again, just hard to manage and make life so much more challenging than it should be. And the inattentiveness could also impact personal relationships, because we as ADHDers might appear we're not really paying attention, or maybe we really aren't paying attention because we're getting distracted, but it's never coming from a bad place. It's our ADHD symptoms, but of course it can also impact all kinds of relationships. Now, another symptom of ADHD is hyperfocus, and hyperfocus is characterized by intense absorption in a single task or activity, and that can often result from ADHD brain seeking stimulation. And while hyperfocus can be really good and help us to get things done, it can also lead to tunnel vision, where we just focus on this one thing, this one project, and we forget about everything else, everything outside of that tunnel. And when you're stuck in hyperfocus mode and in that tunnel vision, it's so easy to forget about everything else in life. You forget to eat, to drink, to go to the bathroom. And of course, that can really impact yourself. It can impact your body. It can create you not to fuel your body, not to hydrate your body. And it can also, again, impact relationships. And often we think that hyperfocus is solely something that's awesome. And don't get me wrong, I sometimes love my hyperfocus, but it can also turn to the other side where, again, we're neglecting everything else. And for those of you who are also Gilmore Girls fans, like me, you might remember the scene of Paris Geller at Yale when she becomes obsessed with her hot glue gun, and all she's doing is working on her glue gun and forgets to do anything else like eating, sleeping, etc. And for those of you who aren't Gilmore friends and remember every scene from it, hyperfocus is this intense focus, and unless something or someone really interrupts you and kind of pulls you out of that hyperfocus, it's really hard to think of anything else and do anything else. Another symptom of ADHD is disorganization, and this is another super common symptom of ADHD that stems from the difficulties in executive functioning skills. If you're interested, I can also make a whole video about executive functioning. Again, let me know in the comments below. And this challenge makes it hard to maintain order in your life, structure in your daily life, and it often leads us to forget about things, about like appointments, or you might constantly misplace items. And after scheduling an appointment, you might tell yourself, I will definitely remember this. And pretty much as soon as you step out of the doctor's office, you've totally forgotten that you even scheduled an appointment. Another symptom of ADHD that can really have a huge impact on us, but is not as much talked about, is irritability and emotional dysregulation. And these struggles often arise from difficulties in managing our emotions and just coping with stress, because especially a life with ADHD is very, very stressful. And a person with ADHD may experience just sudden mood springs or outbursts in response to perceived frustration or setbacks, which can really impact their interactions with others and also their own well-being. Because it also happens that you get so mad and so frustrated with yourself that you might start hurting yourself because the emotions just seem to overpower everything else, and you might throw your laptop on the floor or break glasses, or it can also be that you break up, for example, with your partner. So these emotional fluctuations and these feelings of intense emotions can really put a strain on relationships. Not only might the other person not be able to understand why you're reacting in such an extreme way, but you also might do something to hurt that relationship or yourself. And this, of course, can also lead to feelings of isolation or low self-esteem. And because you feel like you cannot trust yourself around other people, or you feel that intense shame of how you reacted, or because of these intense emotional outbursts, you might also lose friendships and romantic relationships. The last ADHD symptom I want to talk about today is the lack of motivation. And this can often result from difficulties in initiating tasks and also sustaining effort without the immediate rewards or any external stimuli. So picture someone with ADHD procrastinating on mundane tasks or assignments, struggling to muster up the motivation to start without looming deadlines or external pressures. This lack of motivation can really hinder personal but also professional growth, right? Because it often leads to feelings of underachievement, dissatisfaction. You're constantly super stressed, or you might not finish things on time, or if you would have started earlier, you could have done a better job. So before we also talk about the diagnostic process, I quickly want to touch on where ADHD comes from. Because ADHD is a very complex condition, right? There is no single cause for it, but research suggests that it's influenced by both genetic and also environmental factors. And brain imaging studies have shown differences in brain structure and function between individuals with ADHD and also those without ADHD. So for the process of getting diagnosed, it typically involves consulting with a mental health professional, such as a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and ideally someone who specializes with ADHD. And they will conduct a comprehensive evaluation, which typically includes interviews, a questionnaire, observations of your behavior, and then the assessment is just there to kind of help out rule any other possible explanations for the symptoms, and then help the physician determine if ADHD is the underlying cause. If you're looking for a step-by-step guide on how to get diagnosed, who to reach out to, where to find certain doctors and specialists, what are the steps, what do I need to bring there, how do I prepare, and also what to do after a possible diagnosis, check the link down below. I created a whole diagnosis guide for you to make things easier. In general, it can also depend where you live, but a diagnosis for ADHD isn't always a straightforward line. And many individuals, myself included, we struggle for years without really understanding why certain tasks seem so much harder for us than for other people. And I remember going through school feeling like I was the only one kind of behind, but nobody seemed to understand why I was struggling or why I felt behind. And it really wasn't until my PhD, while I was actually working with children and adolescents who have ADHD, that I kind of started to piece things together and started to understand myself so much better. And this also ultimately led me to start my journey to seek out a formal diagnosis, which I then finally received at 27. And that's why I became an ADHD advocate, an ADHD coach. And there's one thing that I want you to take away from this video. It's that you're not alone in your struggles. There are other people out there. I am there to support you. And thank you so much for watching this week's video. If you have any feedback, any wishes for more videos or specific topics, please just let me down in the comments below, or you can always send me an email. And thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next week in the next video. Bye.